Hey, everybody, it's Michael Shermer. It's time for another episode of The Michael Shermer Show. Guess who's on the show today? Returning champion, Amy Alkon. She was on before for her, let me give her a proper introduction here. She's an independent investigative science writer specializing in applied science, that is, using scientific evidence to solve real-world problems. You see why I like that. Alkon critically evaluates and synthesizes research across disciplines and then translates it into everyday language, empowering regular people, that's us, to make scientifically informed decisions for the best of their health and well-being. For 25 years, she wrote the award-winning science-based, nationally syndicated advice column distributed by creators and is the author of 5 books. Most recently, before the new one I'll just introduce in a moment, for which she was on the show before, is called Unfuckology, How to Live with Guts and Confidence. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. Actually, Amy, I cite that book in my next book, and the copy editor corrected and said, you have to put an asterisk where the U is.
I hate that. It is not my choice. No fig leaves, but bookstores require that or they won't sell it. So I defer to...
Really? Is that right?
Yeah, the god of sales.
Oh, my gosh.
I know.
That's
It's
crazy.
just so stupid high. We all know what the word is.
Well, anyway, here's the new book. It's called Going Menopostal, What You and Your Doctor Need to Know About the Real Science of Menopause and Perimenopause. I forgot to mention that you've written for the New York Times, Time Magazine, the Washington Post, the Independent in UK, Maclean's. You've been on Today, Good Morning America, CNN, Nightline, Anderson Cooper, Coast to Coast. Oh, you did Coast to Coast AM. All right, that's cool. You get those calls at 2 a.m. That's always big fun.
But actually, I didn't write the story for the New York Times. Someone wrote one about me. So,
Oh,
and these other
okay.
places. Yeah. I don't write that many news article type pieces.
Oh, well, that's pretty cool, though. Anyway, well, Amy, I've known you a long time. I never thought we would be discussing that part of your body because I don't know you that well. So what's going on down there?
Well, it's actually going on throughout all of medicine, and it's that we have most of our medical care, and this is according to the U.S. National Academy of Medicine, not some random Twitter person. Most of our medical care is not based on adequate evidence. More than half. I mean, adequate. That's not like rigorous. It's adequate, and you see this if you know the science. You see this in every area of your treatment, and I do. And that was how I came to write this book, because I was sitting here in Venice, California, in my very temperate office. It's the most temperate place in the world. It's like 55 degrees year round, breeze blowing. And all of a sudden, oh my God, I'm locked in a trunk in the Everglades. Every pore of my body is just pouring sweat. It's horrible. And I think, oh my God, I think this is a hot flash. So horrible. And I think, if what I want to do is to go to my doctor, my gynecologist, and say, I'm uncomfortable. What do I do? But I know better. I was coached, this very generous guy. He co-wrote this seminal book in epidemiology. I can't speak, a modern epidemiology. His name's Sandra Greenland, just generously coached me in how to read and critically evaluate science since about 2007. And so because of him, and because he sent me all these articles about fraud and abuse and errors in medicine, I was very attuned to that. And so I went through and started this deep dive into the research, and I saw there was this huge, horrible gap between the practice standards and the science. And every area of medicine, again, is like this, but perimenopause and menopause medical care is the most patient-betraying area of medicine.
How can that be? I mean, this is we've known about this for a long time, and there must be at least a century's worth of serious medical research on it. How can there be still this huge gap?
You're exactly right. Here's the scandal of gynecology departments. In gynecology departments, they are all what I call baby doctors. So they're maternity specialists. They are highly trained in delivering babies, and they're also reproductive specialists. So they specialize in fertility and these problems people have, polycystic ovary disease. Nobody gets training in menopause. Or some now are starting to, but the training they have, it's really kind of a joke. They take an online course at the Menopause Society. That's like passing traffic school. It's not deep knowledge. You're not having some person in clinical rotation who's a seasoned old crusty expert kick your ass. and you're not reading the science because here's another revelation. There are three big myths of our medical care, and one of them is that doctors read scientific evidence and evaluate you and treat you based on the evidence. They don't. Doctors are not trained to read evidence in med school. They can't critically evaluate it, and they don't, frankly, have time to read it, at an HMO like mine, Kaiser Permanente, where doctors have 20 minutes to see you, chop, 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 one patient after the next, medical record keeping requirements, and I'll have doctors email me at 7 o'clock quite frequently. So it's not like they're doing nothing. So I can sympathize. I would read it, but I'm a psycho scientific mole rat who sits here dawn till dusk, rejoicing over working. And people want families and things. So I can't expect that of them.
Wow, yeah, I used to be with Kaiser. If you got 20 minutes, that was pretty generous, actually. Mine were usually like 8 minutes. Yeah. So, since you're steeped in the literature of evolutionary psychology, let's just kind of back up and do a big picture look here. Why do women go through menopause at all? Why can't you just give birth for, your whole life? Wouldn't evolution select for you having 50 babies in the course of 100 years or
Well,
something?
no, because as you get older, you get less and less, progressively less healthy. Aging, it causes unhealth, basically. You erode, we erode. And part of what I do in this book is give you the ways of eating and exercise that are the most powerful and efficient for really not eroding, and for being healthy throughout your lifespan. So you're just a little more wrinkled. But with evolutionary psychology, there's no strong proof of this, but we can speculate. There's the grandmother hypothesis that we needed to have people weren't having children to care for the children that exist. And but really, you see that as we age, you're going to be much less healthy. Like women need to, if they're going to have children, they want to freeze their eggs. I think it's that they need to do it before 35, certainly, and ideally well before. And the same thing, man, you have old sperm. Your sperm gets old. So you've got to do that too, when you're young in your 20s, if you want to have kids at a later date. And so that's part of it, just that we're not, for whatever reason, these reasons probably we're not adapted to, be like 80 and pushing a stroller. And oh my God, God forbid.
Yeah, also with limited resources in our ancestral environment, once you've given birth and then become a grandmother, probably there's not much more benefits you could provide versus those resources being allocated to the upcoming next generation of women. So essentially, natural selection said, "We're just going to let your body rot. You're done. Thank you very much. Now go away."
But we're learning more and more, mitochondria, they've been called the energy furnaces of cells. They're much more. I don't want to go into it because it's a complex area, but keeping our mitochondria healthy through eating a diet that is not high in sugar or flour, that is not inflammatory, doing exercise, certain kinds of exercise. And by the way, every bit of advice a medical provider gives you, pretty much, it just reminded me that is wrong. Osteoporosis, Kaiser Permanente, on their website, they talk about walking for healthy bones. Oh my God. Unless you're carrying an elephant, you're not putting enough weight on your bones to tell them they're needed. And what you do, it's really muscles. What you do for muscles, you do for bones. So you need to challenge your muscles. And by challenging them, you create tiny tears in them. And the repair is building strong, healthy muscles. And by the way, all that stuff on bone mineral density, it's designed, these tests, these scanners, they're designed to prescribe you drugs you don't need as a healthy woman. Osteoporosis it was diagnosed in just a few elderly women with something called kyphosis, where they were bent over. And the biggest cause of broken bones is falling when you're 79. Not that your bones are just, suddenly like so holy that you collapse into a bucket.
Right. Yeah, I've heard that line that the most dangerous thing an 80 plus person can do every day is take a shower.
Right?
Because
Or
that
be
you
me. I've got like garden clogs, purple gardening clogs in the middle of my living room. Hi, death trap, Amy. Dummy.
too funny. Yeah. So, for those of us that missed the sex ed class in eighth grade, can you explain what women's bodies go through each month, and then what stops or what changes when you hit menopause?
Sure. So there are two parts. I'm going to keep it brief. There are basically two parts of our menstrual cycle. There's the estrogen part at the top, and the bottom is the progesterone phase. These are both hormones, and they work together. They're counterparts. in the menstrual cycle. And so estrogen is the hormone that leads up to ovulation. That's when there's a little sac with an egg in it and it ruptures. It's supposed to rupture, and then the egg is released. And this is so cool. I always thought the fallopian tubes were connected. They're not. They're like little baseball mitts. They sweep over, they grab the egg and they send it down to the uterus, where if some sperm meet up with it, get fertilized, it implants into the uterine wall. And 9 months later, you have a screaming being on your hands, or two or three if you have, late pregnancies, which happens more. They have like triplets or something. But anyway, so what goes wrong in perimenopause is that you often don't ovulate. So there's a whole signaling thing that's going on. But in perimenopause, that's the transition years to menopause, like 3 to 10 years, in which some women, me especially, have horrible, horrible symptoms. And during this time, what happens is you'll have a normal period, the same as all other periods, doesn't seem any different, but your egg will not rupture. This is called anovulation. So you're not ovulating. And this is very bad because what happens is when that egg ruptures, there's like this yellow litter left over from the sac is all a mess on the floor, and it becomes progesterone. It's the corpus luteum. It's yellow, waxy stuff. And you need progesterone for a certain amount of days in your cycle, like 10 to 12, I think it is. And in order for you to have sufficient progesterone to protect your endometrium so you don't get sick, your endometrium is a uterine lining. And what happens is in perimenopause, now doctors see perimenopause as menopause light. They think that estrogen is just in decline, petering out, but it's not. This is why science is so important to be injected into our medical care, because what happens is that estrogen spikes and dives. It goes sometimes 3 times higher. And this makes estrogen is proliferative and inflammatory. And in proper amounts, it's great. With progesterone, it's great. You need it. It's an important hormone for every cell in our body. But when it's spiking and you have no progesterone, this is a recipe for hell, especially for some of us. And the reason the book is Going Menopostal, that reflects my rage that after I fought 3 battles with Kaiser to get the progesterone I need, the amount I need, and get it covered, instead of giving the cancer risk increasing drug that was on their formulary alone, is so terrible. What was I saying here? I lost my train of thought. It's about my rage that they wouldn't give this to other women. And then also the symptoms. I'm a nice person. I like people. I'm at the hardware store in perimenopause, and some man, like my dad, I'm from the Midwest, my dad, my grandpa fixing stuff in the basement, whatever, behind me in line. Like I would like this man just because that breed that I know. Oh my God, the guy is humming. I mean, seriously, I like looking around, I want a heavy object, I want to bludgeon this man to death so he shuts up. And then you're so ashamed because this is horrible. You're thinking like, calm the hell down, Alcon. But this was from the lack of progesterone, and you feel like you're basically like on rims on the highway in a police chase, which we have a lot of here in California. It is terrible. And there are many other symptoms, the hot flashes, nausea, I mean, insomnia, and then you have brain fog. It's just terrible. So your doctor, all these baby doctors not knowing anything about this, they can't diagnose you and they can't treat you. They'll dismiss what's wrong with you. They won't connect all these things. You have mysterious, just like dysfunction of your whole body. You think you're falling apart. And as you know, Michael, uncertainty is the most disturbing feeling to humans, especially medical uncertainty. And so women will try to seek out these diagnoses of like fibromyalgia and other things, that and get treated for diseases they don't have. It's terrible.
Just again, I just can't believe that after all this medical research, and half the population is female, and they go to Kaiser, and they have OBGYNs and so forth. How could they not know this? I mean, if you walked into your doc and told that story, they should go, "Oh, well, I'll tell you exactly what's going on."
I know. And my gynecologist, he's a good guy. I do have a man. It's not like those people with cancer. Okay, unless you've had a glioma, I am not seeing you as a doctor. He's great. So he treated me with respect. And he and his boss, they listened to me. I sent them a slew of studies. I'm really annoying. And they had finally a meeting
You're
with me.
one of those.
I am. Well, you're not going to give me unscience. You're not going to harm me. And this is actually going out. The head of gynecology now at Kaiser West LA is so ignorant of menopause science. She's denying me care that I need. I'm a rapid metabolizer of steroids. I got something done called pharmacogenetics, which looks at your genetic profile as far as how you metabolize drugs. It's very helpful. So I have that and other things that show, oh, look, I have tests showing I don't even get half the estrogen I take. So I need more. I need a double dose. For someone else, that would be a lot. For me, it is not what she calls a super physiologic dose. Now, this woman tells me that I need to taper off estrogen at 60. Okay, this is research circa 2002 that was debunked in 2004. This is 2025, I recall. Yes, I do. We get a little forgetful in menopause. The norepinephrine and dopamine tank, and I have ADHD, and they're already like, hello down there. Anyway, so, and she tells me she reads the science. Yeah, no, you don't. And I sent her this huge document with the study by this guy Back, who shows women who take estrogen late into life, that they don't have breast cancer, that they have protected cardiovascular systems, all this protection. We found that estrogen is protective only if you take it right after menopause as a healthy woman. If you're not healthy, you're broken, estrogen will break you further. It's really pretty terrible.
Yeah. I just think there's so much literature to read and doctors are busy. They don't keep up. They should. They know they should. They just can't. I've tell this story about my mom went through 10 years of brain tumors. She had meningioma brain tumors
Oh my
that
God.
women get more than men. And then so she had 5 craniometries. This goes on and on
Oh my
it took a whole
God.
decade. But in the middle of all this, she got all of a sudden there's a tumor in one of her lungs. I thought, come on, what are the chances she got 2 completely different kind of tumors that maybe some cells in the brain, migrated to her lungs or something like this. So, and she was being treated by these top oncologists at USC, and they go, nope, that's not possible. The meningioma tumors cannot do what you just think they can do. Anyway, that night I went to a dinner party at Carol Tavris's house.
I love
far
her.
from where you have, yeah. And there at the dinner was a guy named Avram Blooming, who is an oncologist.
I quote both of them in my book.
Yeah. Oh, right. Yes, right. So I'm telling Avram this story. He goes, no, there was just a paper out like a year ago showing that can happen, and I'll send it to you. So he sends it to me. I send it to the USC doc. And he's like, never saw that. I'm like,
isn't this terrible? This is, okay, everyone needs to know this is all of medicine. And the problem is, if you're me and you're really a pain in the ass too, you can deal with this because you read the research. But doctors, remember, they are not trained to read the research. They don't know how. And they don't have time. And when you don't know how to read the research, you also don't know how to look it up. You don't know how to use PubMed, these Google Scholar and all these things. And you need to read enough in an area to know who are the key researchers who are doing really good work and, who does the methodological crap. And know things like you don't look at studies from China and go, okay, you have to look for a body of work from everybody else because there's so much fraud. And these doctors have not a clue in the world. Like this one where she's telling me to taper off estrogen. She's telling me this is harmful. It's called iatrogenesis, medical care that intends to help that harms. So you need to continue taking estrogen through 79, like I was saying, when you're old, when you're going to fall, in order for your bones to be protected. And if you stop at 60, not only do you reverse the advances that you had in your bones, you are unprotected for all those years. Your cardiovascular system is unprotected. Right after menopause, if you don't take estrogen, your estrogen receptors in your endothelium, this is the one cell layer, the lining of your arteries, they go away. So you lose this vital protection, and 1 in 5 women will die of cardiovascular disease. It's huge. And soon 1 in 3. So all these women really need real science driving their care. And instead they're getting this, like the head of Kaiser Gynecology, West LA, is ignorant, tells me she knows science. And she told me also she's choosing the drugs in the formulary. Hello, why don't we have my dog choose them? Because it's, same crapshoot. It's terrible. It's really terrible.
Amy, you're so funny. I love your books and your writing.
Thank you.
This book. Yeah, I know you got a great sense of humor. You open this book with a story about your best friend forever dumped you. by email on a Sunday. She said, I think we should go our separate ways. There was no explanation. There was just the act. Like I was some stranger she'd once had exchanged sharp words with in a grocery store. I never heard from her again. Getting dumped by a friend is worse than getting dumped by a man because you kind of expect that could happen. There's also a predictable set of reasons a man ends it with you. The sex got boring. You got boring. He's in love with your sister. He's in love with your sister's husband. Anyway, did you? So you've never figured out what was the upshot of that
No, and
story?
I would wake up, at 3 in the morning, and part of it was perimenopause, but just,
Yeah.
why? And because again, uncertainty is so disturbing. It was just like, look, I hate your red hair or whatever. Anything, any kind of explanation I really would have been helped by. And it really is terrible. Women feel so acutely this loss of female friendship. And, I just don't want to go through that ever again. I mean, I take, of course, like risks and have people in my life because I'm not going to not do that. But that was really painful.
Yeah. All right. So symptoms begin for you at age 52. What's the range for women on average when it begins?
It really varies. Some women early perimenopause is 35,
Oh, wow.
and, I write about that because there are nuances with each area of menopause, but most women mid-40s to, like, 50. I think 51 is the average age, but really things are very varied, and the same thing goes here's another bit of unscience, the menstrual cycle that we've been told is 28 days. No, it's not. No, it can be 50 or 20. And those fertility apps that go by a 28-day menstrual cycle, they're telling women like what days they should, have sex to get pregnant. Women who are desperate to have a baby, oh my God, and they're wrong. It's really egregious. So just when I say every area, I mean every area.
Amazing. Again, more bad science. Okay. So there's a broad range there. And then what kind of range is there for the intensity of the symptoms?
There's a huge range. Some women do not have symptoms, really at all. They barely experience it, if at all. And they're lucky because they're not having the suffering. But here's the thing what we've seen is that progesterone, like estrogen, is a protective drug to take. And so those women, it's very likely that their progesterone is low or non existent, that they're having these anovulatory cycles even though they're not being so disturbed by them, or they're having too short progesterone phase cycles. And I want to say also, I should credit the research on progesterone and perimenopause comes from this incredible researcher, Geraldine Pryor, this fierce woman, grew up in Alaska with no running water or electricity, child of missionaries. And in this fierce, harsh environment, it created this scientist who fights for things. And you were asking, why don't we know this stuff? Now, she is, the work that she puts out is good science, but it is contrary to the beliefs in science about perimenopause and medroxyprogesterone acetate, the drug they give, the synthetic that was on Kaiser's formulary that increases breast cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, risk of Alzheimer's and just brain harm, and so she fought to have perimenopause recognized for the unique hormonal state it is with the ups and downs of estrogen. This comes from her work and others that she cites. And then also to have progesterone recognized, it is the most healthy, least side effect laden drug, fewer side effects than aspirin. And really, in perimenopause for me, it was the body's Valium. It was wonderful. And it gave me my sleep back, which is really important. That's the fail safe I tell women in the book because I say, look, I've written this book in ordinary language that can be understood by everyone. There's my router over there. It says, write every page of this book for Pamela D. She's my favorite bus driver. She's smart, but she doesn't read science. So it needs to be accessible. And so that way women can bring the science to their doctors, but that's not enough because doctor, here, give me evidence-based care. The doctor can say, well, no, no. But Geraldine Pryor, what she did is she created this quantitative basal temperature taking where you measure your temperature every morning for a month and ideally for a few months, so you have some additional data. And using it's explained in my book, but you use what your temperature is to determine whether or not you have progesterone and adequate progesterone for adequate days. And if you don't, you can go to your doctor and say, and I'm not saying that you should lie, but sleep. We don't like you can't say I don't get to sleep if you're a doctor. So that's very persuasive. And say, look. here's the data. This is legit medical data from my body. I've measured this. It takes digital thermometer, 9.99. That's all. Write it down in the mornings every day. And you can say, I'm not making adequate progesterone and show them a little chart, and then say, I need this. And then what you need to do is to get the amount that they give in France, which they don't give in the US for no reason whatsoever. They tried to deny me the amount. It's 300 milligrams of what's called oral micronized progesterone, and this is a really safe form of progesterone to take. Not unlike medroxyprogesterone acetate, the synthetic, but it is in peanut oil. And the only, there are a few reasons you can't take it. If you have liver ascites, which is fluid buildup, or really low blood pressure. But basically, it's extremely healthy and health promoting and protective of your cardiovascular system, your bones. It works with estrogen. They work together to, foster and maintain strong bones, strong, healthy bones. So all of this is just vital. And you're not able to get this from your doctor. You go to the baby doctor, they don't know. They're basically faking it off a sheet. They got some practice standards. Oh, here's what we do. Or they heard something, or their colleague does something. That's not science. And the reason why they give 100 or 200 milligrams here, it should be, oh, well, because it was tested against this and that, and it's better. We see that it has better effects. They haven't done that. They just say, they actually said to me initially that oh, well, that's the amount they give in France. And I said, you hear all these French studies, but that's French studies. I'm sorry. Are they Martians, or they just dress better and eat better food? Come on.
Yeah, but again, I mean, with baby boomers, coming online here for these kinds of issues, you would think a place like Kaiser would have like the menopause expert person that sees patients all day because there's so many now.
Well, they have one. They have a woman who went through the Menopause Society's training. But you know what? I mean, when I talk to them, I can identify all the stuff they don't know. It's amazing because that's different from what I do. Like I said, I'm a psycho. I studies piled all over my floor. There's a shot of that. It looks like, like mountains, like moguls. I read for 8 years, deep dive, and I'm terrified of getting things wrong. And I send things to researchers and say, oh, I did this with Carol Tavris and Blooming. Hand me my ass, like kick my ass. And Carol knows me, and so you do it in a way where you show them that you're grateful for the most harsh criticism, because I can't bear to have errors in this book because I could hurt somebody. And so that's kind of thinking, whereas everybody else, like these doctors, can't blame them. This is normal life. They want to go home and have a family and go on a date or whatever and have a life, and for the last couple of years, I didn't go anywhere. Thanksgiving, Christmas, people invite me. I'm sorry, I have to stay home. The book monster, I called it. And so, when they have one expert and she really doesn't know things, I love when they say stuff to me like, there's something called sex hormone binding globulin, which I have elevated levels of because I eat a carnivore diet. And if you don't have high insulin, which is good, if healthy insulin, very healthy, then your SHBG, it's called, it goes sky high, and it binds with steroids. So it binds with testosterone and estradiol and sails them right out of your system. And so I'm asking for a double dose of what would be a high dose for someone else, but for me, sufficient, since I'm getting less than half the estrogen I take. And she says to me, oh, but estrogen raises your SHBG. Well, yes, oral estrogen does, but I'm not taking oral estrogen. I'm taking transdermal. And you know that because I'm asking for double patch, and you see my records. And so that raises it in the most minimal way. And it probably is going to suppress it. And so this is the kind of thing like, hi, I mean, I'm a weirdo who lives in Venice. I used to have a pink car, I have a tiny little dog. Wears clothes. I'm a crackpot. I shouldn't be the medical genius in all of these situations. And in every situation, I had a eye surgery for my, thanks mom, this genetic disease called, I'm going to say it politely, Fuchs dystrophy. You can better believe I say it the other way. And, so I had to have a transplant, the endothelium, the one cell layer over your cornea. I had to get a transplant in that. And this doctor made me really sick. She gave me an overdose of steroids. They all give, all these doctors, these people have serious eye surgeries, they give you antibiotics and steroids that have back preservatives. They begin destroying the cornea in a matter of days. I mean, it's crazy.
What?
And so, okay, so she gives me I can't say it right, afloxacin. Okay, that's what it is, with a back preservative. But wait, there's moxifloxacin that's like not expensive. It's a generic or, and it doesn't have the preservative. How about we switch me to the drug that doesn't destroy the cornea? Okay, cool. I mean, like, why should, and I was working on my book till I like fell in the car and fell in the gurney, so I didn't have time to read. She's a surgeon, so she seems good. At the cutting stuff, she's sticking in X-Acto in your eye. Yeah, I can't, know that. Her colleagues said she was good, and so I have to hope and believe that's true. But on the medicine stuff, so these doctors, they focus on the X-Acto part. They know nothing about the drugs they prescribe, like nothing, nothing. I mean, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. Every area is like this, and so if you can't do a deep dive into the research, or there's someone hasn't covered it. Like I cover this area, Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, other people cover the low carb area. But really, you need this for every area of medicine. I have a book on osteoporosis that I have mostly written to debunk all the crap and tell you what actually keeps you healthy. But, that took me a long time. And like hematology, oncology, your specific kind of cancer, like you said, with the lung, the cancer taking over the lung, doctors, oh no, it's not connected. And then you just go to a dinner party. I mean, how random, how horrible that if you had stayed home, like what would the outcome have been? I mean, that's terrible.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, this is just crazy that science writers like Gary Taubes. I mean, before Gary Taubes brought so much attention to sugar and carbs and all that stuff, and he's the one that points out that doctors have no training in nutrition. They don't take any courses in med school, and this is like the biggest predictor of obesity,
I
diabetes, and all that.
know.
We have all these problems, and the doctors for decades have been going, I want to wonder what it is.
It's so terrible, and the lipid hypothesis, the idea that cholesterol or lipids cause heart disease, it is not proven. It looks more and more like it's high blood sugar, insulin resistance, and what's called inflammaging, and that's when you keep having the chronic inflammation, chronic low-grade inflammation, and then you basically have a broken immune system where, you're in because it's on fire all the time, low-grade fire, you end up not having the immune resources when you need them if you have an infection or a disease that needs to have some, immune warriors come out and deal with it. And so you want to not have that. And so I personally, I've gone really SWAT team on inflammation, especially because I got so sick from the steroid overdose this doctor gave me. I mean, crazy, crazy.
Oh, but on a
Yeah.
separate question to that, what are the steroids supposed to do?
Oh,
Enhance
so what
healing?
sorry, I talked over you. What did you say?
Yeah, are they supposed steroids are supposed to enhance healing or something?
Well, they're supposed to prevent the rejection of your transplant.
Oh, I
But
see.
see, here's the thing. The transplant I had is called DMEC, Decimets, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna not go there because I can't remember it right now. But basically, it has an it's either zero point 0.6 or 0.7% chance of rejection.
Mm.
And so because it's not vascularized, you don't have blood vessels in there in the endothelium or cornea. So it doesn't even pay for them to do matching before they give you a transplant. You just hope you get a young person's endothelium. And I mean, and how miraculous. It's why I'm an organ donor, because this is amazing that I'm allowed to see
So
because of this.
some young man on a motorcycle.
Yeah, I thought that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
donor
Yeah,
cycle.
donor cycle,
Yeah,
yeah.
and so, so the steroids, but the thing is, I'm looking at this now because, the steroids, so the clinical habit, I won't be too long on this, but they prescribe the standard in the field is 4 drops after the transplant. Well, this is not based on, "Oh, we researched this and 3 didn't do so well." It's just clinical habit. Nobody compared anything, and they don't look at, well, there's this one woman, Marianne Price, who's a clinician and researcher. She looks at, oh, well, what about this steroid or that steroid? But there's only a tiny bit of research in that. What I want to know is what can you use instead of steroids because they have horrible systemic effects. So my doctor told me when she said steroids, and I said, oh, because I know about steroids and inflammation, all this other stuff that's related. And I said, oh, well, I'm worried because the bone destruction, all this other destruction from steroids in the body. And she said, oh, they don't have systemic effects. They stay in the eye. I felt like that's unlikely. Sure enough, I look it up. Yeah, no, they don't. I had horrible systemic effects, just terrible, and I had her switch me. The doctors do not like this when you tell them the reasons why the drug they gave you was, like, horrible, and I had her switch me to another steroid that has less systemic effects, but it still made me sick, and, so this is not it's not good to give patients. Oh, so what she does, so they give 4 in the field, she figures if 4 is good, 8 is better. This is not how steroids work. This is horrible. When you give steroids to a metabolically healthy patient like me, you can probably see, look at my arms, like I exercise, I eat a low inflammatory diet, that
You
I
do? What
am.
is that? What is a low inflammatory diet?
Oh,
Plant based?
well, let me just finish telling this because
Oh
I
yeah.
you get lost enough in stories. But so what she did is she suppressed healthy inflammation in me, and this was also a red flag. I asked her when she talked about steroids. I said, "Well, what about healthy inflammation?" She said, "Oh no, we want to suppress inflammation." And I thought, like, well, missing some boats here, lady. But I usually, it was because I hadn't read because I was so busy on the book until like the moment before that I really didn't remember about the drugs, and then I took them and then got sick. So you were saying, oh, low inflammation. So what you want to do is to keep down omega-6 fatty acids and prioritize omega-3. So I eat fish, and you want to not eat. These are basically inflammatory foods that have very high omega-6. I don't eat the oils. And there are all sorts of fights about them, but basically, they do they're inflammatory in a way other foods are not. I eat butter, ghee, or ghee. I can never say that right. And I eat a carnivore diet, and I fill in with some supplements for the few vegetables, the nutrients I miss from vegetables: B1, manganese, or a couple of the methyl. I forget which folate is. It's folate. It's the kind that's better. So I only eat a few things. I eat herring, I eat salmon, I eat beef, I eat the ghee and then butter. And what else do I eat? Eggs. Oh, big secret on eggs. Here's a big tip. So you see these people like Vital Farms, scumbags, advertising, and I can prove this, so it's not libel slander. Well, actually, it'd be slander. They advertise pasture raised eggs. So people think, oh, good, I won't, have inflammatory food. Well, that's crap because their pasture raised eggs also get fed soy and corn. It's really terrible. And so if you look, I think it's like eating maybe 2 eggs is like eating a tablespoon of canola oil or something. I can't remember what it was, but it's really unhealthy. Supermarket eggs, oh my God, they're the worst, inflammatory, terrible. And so I started getting, they're hard to find eggs with that are pasture raised that are not fed corn and soy. And they're hard to find. And oh my God, because I was sick and everything. I live near Erewhon in Venice, which is a store where they charge rich people like ungodly amounts of money to show them like you are rich because you can burn money in a fire and it doesn't matter. And so, oh my God, I'm from Michigan. Like the idea that I would spend, it was so horrible. They didn't have eggs. I had to buy 6. They didn't have a dozen. 10.99
For
for
six
6.
eggs?
Yeah, and it was like $22 for a dozen eggs, and I went to the counter and I was like, I want to disassociate myself from being a person who paid this much for eggs, and I said, like, I just have an eye issue, and like I'm don't do this. This is horrible. This is like worst thing I've ever bought because like this is insane. Anyway, so now I get the ones when they're in at Whole Foods. This one kind called Chino Valley, soy free, corn free. There's Happy Hens, but basically they're really hard to find. They're always out of them. And I was at one point where I was going to order 58 from a farm in Michigan, but you have to call like a Tuesday at 7 p.m. on the dot or you don't get them.
What do they massage the hens before they give the eggs?
No, they just feed them like the fruit that isn't soy and corn. It's so crazy. And so the reason I eat like this is because I'm 61. And at 61, as you age, you get much less robust in terms of your immune system and all the stuff in your body, and so bones, everything. And so I want to give my body the least amount of stress to overcome in terms of healing and everything, make my immune system as robust as possible, be as strong as possible.
So
And
did you change your diet when you went through menopause?
oh, no, I actually, no, it was just in the middle. I've eaten low carb. Gary Taub's a good friend of mine. And so I've known him forever and ever since he wrote The Soft Science of Dietary Salt. for, oh no, I think was that, yeah, well, it was for Nature in like 1998, and then through low carb stuff. And so in 2009, that was when I went low carb. And then it was like February of last year that I started eating carnivore. And I just meant to do it, for a little while. I was fixing my testosterone level. And as a woman, you cannot take testosterone. That's another thing. The doctor, their menopause expert, told me, she said, oh, you should take testosterone. And I said, well, no, it's not safe. And she said, yes, it is. No, it's not, because I read the research and I know how. And I see that there just isn't enough longitudinal, like over years of time, study of whether it's safe for the cardiovascular system and, per breast cancer. So I'm not going to take it. And that's why there's no FDA approved testosterone for women. And to take the men's kind, it's not safe. They're huge doses. And the safest kind, the best delivery form is a pellet implanted under the skin. And that doesn't exist for women, except in some, like, they're like providers that sell it in their own thing. You don't know what you're getting. And so what I ended up doing, and I don't recommend this for everyone, because, and I didn't put it in the book because what your medical, your whole individual health metric is matters. But I um, take DHEA, which is a hormone that you can get as a supplement, to try to correct that, and it did, and then it didn't, because I started eating carnivore, and then it was uncorrected some more. But I want to tell people also, supplements, this world, it's the wild, wild west. There can be anything. You can have like small children, like tiny little, like, yeah, okay, I'm fantasizing here, but in your like your vitamin capsule, nobody knows. And so Consumer Lab is great. I'm a member. It's a member site. It costs maybe like $50 or something, but they tell you, what's in them, if they have the amount of the stuff, if they have arsenic and everything. And so I use that to buy supplements, and also to be frugal about it, because you see that, like I've owned GNC and Swanson. These are really good brands. And I wouldn't think so, because I had them growing up. Tel 12 Mall, the GNC store. It seems, sort of, like it wouldn't be good, but they are. So,
Okay. All right, let's go through the different bodily systems that change during menopause and what you recommend women do to deal with that.
okay. So bones, so interesting. So, there's this whole scam. The Merck came up with this drug called Fosamax that my mother took. It's called a bisphosphonate. And it was just for, would have been just taken by these very, elderly women with very fragile bones, to protect them. But they wanted, a bigger customer base than that. So they came up, this is so horrible. They funded all this research, which found things that, that prescribed, that led to the prescription of bisphosphonates. They got these scanners, or these huge, the scanners for your bones were enormous and very expensive. And they funded smaller ones going into doctor's offices and medical facilities, because the scanners would diagnose you as needing a drug. Now, osteoporosis, porous bones, this is based on, what they thought about bones, like from centuries ago in France. This idea of porous bones. This is merely a risk for bone breakage. It doesn't mean, if you have porous bones, if you have a low bone, it's called bone density score. That doesn't mean you'll break bones. And if you have a high one, it doesn't mean you won't. Because what it doesn't measure, these scanners don't measure bone quality. They measure bone quantity, how much bone stuff you have in there. And guess what? Those drugs, the bisphosphonates that supposedly are preventing bone breakage, what they do is they stop the removal of old crappy bone. So you've got bone that's way past its prime, and it would get removed by these cells called osteoclasts. I remember these osteoclast cutters, C cutters, and osteoblast builders, B builders, and so you're not, and you don't build as fast as you cut, especially in menopause and older age. And so by keeping crappy old bone around, basically bisphosphonates, they make your bones more brittle and breakable. They cause micro cracks in your bones. And so, like, within 3 years, that's the amount of time it takes to destroy your bone. That's cool, really cool research, by the way. Microcracks. Richie Abel in England, he used the particle beam scanner in Germany. This is the size of a football field to see this nano on the nano level. And this is the kind of research I read. And talking to him, I don't usually talk to many people. I read their research because I don't care what you have to say or if you're impressive. You can be like the guy who's like doing science in the janitor's closet. If it's good science, I'm there. But, he was really, I mean, it's really important research because microcracks, you're cracking your bones. What the bisphosphonates don't do is produce what you need, strong, quality, resilient bones. This is really vital for healthy bones. And the way you do that, and doctors tell you to walk. Kaiser on their website, I hate them. I mean, I love Kaiser for a lot of reasons. I have one doctor, my psychiatrist. He is the only evidence-based doctor I have. I can trust him. He's fantastic. He gives pharmacogenetic testing to patients to see, okay, should I give you this antidepressant or that, or how much of a drug do you need? This is responsible medicine, individualized responsible medicine. Anyway, so with osteoporosis, what you need to do, especially in perimenopause when you can still build bone well, is to do this weight-bearing exercise. This is what I recommend in the book. And what I did, nutrition research, by the way, it's just shit. Oops, sorry. I love to
No,
say
I
that.
know. Oh, you
It's
can say
crap.
that.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. It is
Okay.
crap.
So it's just crap. What they do is they ask you, so what did you have to eat all last month? Like, hi, Dr. House. People lie. I mean, really? And you don't remember. Like, I'm
Everybody
prone to
lies.
forget. I'm also going to forget the things that make me look bad. Like, I had a donut and then I had another donut and then yeah. Okay. So, with both the nutrition and the exercise, I reverse engineered from what we want in our cell. What do we want to have happen in our cell? And so with the exercise, what you want to do is what's called slow speed weightlifting. I exercise. I don't know if you can see. I don't want to brag too much about my muscles, but I'm not like a Hercules here. I lift like a Barbie-sized weight graveyard on my floor. But what I do is the slow speed weight training where you lift. You do like 10 reps with a weight heavy for you, very slowly, like 5 up, 5 seconds down, and you do that until you can't do another with good form. And what that does, it creates those tiny tears in your muscles. And you have to be like screaming in pain at the end, and there's some dispute as to whether you need to go to actual failure. There's a guy named Shainfeld, Brad Shainfeld, who's like, yeah, his research says don't really, but it's good to push yourself as much as you can go. And then Steele and Fisher say, yes, you have to do that. These others. So this is really important stuff. If you do this, bones and muscles are metabolically active. What you do for muscle, you do for bones. This is how you prevent osteoporosis. Also, not being a jerk like me and leaving stuff all over your floor. So, and the drugs, they're simply terrible and not a solution. And the idea that you should treat bone mineral density is just crap. It's not bone strength, not bone quality. And so some women, elderly women, there's some women who are so terribly frail that they may need these drugs or these other drugs like raloxifene. They're all evil and horrible. They're all, there's a piper to pay with every drug, but these drugs especially. And then in Japan, they give high doses of vitamin K, which is healthy and helps bones. But once again, that's French research. And so we're not told that. I mean, so you could have the microcracks in your bones, or you could have real help, but that's Japanese. Crazy.
All right, cardiovascular. I
Oh,
presume some
okay. What
cardiovascular
was the
exercise would be
what was
good.
the question initially about each
Well, we were
area?
going through different systems. So bones. Well, if you want to do boobs, you could do that too.
Okay, bones, boobs. Okay, so spilled my tea. Oh, it's okay. At least didn't fall on electronics. That's always the question. Then I'm fine. Just tea. With your cardiovascular system, so men get cardiovascular disease much sooner, and women don't because we have estrogen in our bodies that's relatively high, compared to men, not relatively, it's high. And so what happens in menopause, again, when you lose the estrogen, if you're not taking estradiol then, and estrogen is the general term. Estradiol is the kind in your body. And I should remember to talk about bioidentical hormones and FDA approved drugs and everything. But so your estrogen receptors in your cardiovascular endothelium go away, so you're not protected anymore from cardiovascular disease the way you were. And like I said, 1 in 3 women will die of cardiovascular disease, pretty soon. It's 1 in 5 now. And there's a whole slew of cardiometabolic diseases. And it looks like that these diseases are caused by eating carbohydrates, sugar, and starchy vegetables. Don't ever drink orange juice. It's like the worst thing you could drink. I just have a
Because of the
Coke, a
sugar?
sweet thing. I would have ice cream. I eat dessert very occasionally. Like a scientist, like a party chocolate chip cookies. Like analyze them. Were they made by a vegan out of that gross stuff? Or were they made with butter and like it is like a big analysis. But so you need to prevent that. The evidence suggests that it is eating sugar, flour, starchy carbohydrates that provokes the insulin resistance that puts on fat and causes these diseases. And you want to keep your blood sugar, your blood pressure down. There's a cluster of metabolic risks: high blood pressure, high blood sugar, a large waist circumference. That's visceral fat that packs around your organs. It's not like muffin top fat. It's this dangerous fat that's metabolically active and kills you, and working to kill you. And then what are the others? If you have high triglycerides, low is healthy. And if you have low HDL, high HDL is healthy. So if you have 3 out of 5 of those and you're a white person, you have a risk of metabolic disease. And here's what is so horrible that I cover in this book. Women of color and people of color, I mean, we're mostly all the same, all of us. If you have a liver, I have a liver, but there's some differences. And so Black women tend to have, I think it's like 20% higher, 70% higher HDL and 20% lower triglycerides on average. So you can miss heart disease in a Black woman. And these metabolic standards, the standard is 2 if you're Black. So doctors don't know that. They don't even know about the cluster of 5. This is by Reven at Harvard. It was called Syndrome X. But so it's important. This is stuff I present so patients can diagnose themselves, because we can't wait for doctors and medicine to catch up to the evidence. So we have to do that ourselves. So that's our cardiovascular system. And you need to exercise and eat in these ways, these targeted ways. I call it the trifecta. Now, not everyone's going to be willing to take estrogen and progesterone, and not everyone will, want to, but so if you can do that, that is, if you're healthy and you take it, initiate it at menopause, and then exercise this way, and then eat a low carbohydrate, balanced, like it's what is it called? A well created. I forget, but the guys at Verta Health talk about this. You can look them up, Volek and Finney. They're very good about this. And I tell people who are wealthy, because I think it's like $300 or $400. Like if you have diabetes and some things wrong with you, that it's good to use them because they can deal with it. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to eat low carb," like I did, because I'm metabolically healthy. You can have some risks. So wait, what are we on next?
Well, just on but your cardiovascular exercise is good anyway. You should be doing that even before menopause, but then, adding that.
Oh, and also being sedentary causes inflammation.
Right.
And so one day of sedentary stuff. And so what I do is I run 20 minutes. And also here's something. I learned this because of my the horrible problems I had. It's called adrenal insufficiency. I had tachycardia and bradycardia in the same day. It's really dangerously high, dangerously low heartbeat.
You did?
177 while sitting on my couch. It's amazing.
What? 177?
And then
Oh,
45.
holy.
I mean, this is really dangerous. And so I use that to get a different drug out of get a lodoprednol out of my like irritated eye surgeon. So I mean, and it still continues. I see this like incredibly insane, the heartbeats per minute. And so I'm correcting that. But I learned that, sorry, long story, too long, that what you need to do to help potentiate, it's called your adrenocorticotropic hormone in your pituitary, is to get first morning light in your retinas. So I run for 10 minutes out my porch. If it's cloudy, I'm here in Venice, we have marine layer, then I'll do 15. And that's really important because circadian rhythm fosters the health of, that whole system. It's called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The hypothalamus notices like, okay, you cold, you hot, you thirsty, tells the pituitary, hey, yo, send out a message, and it messages your adrenal glands or whatever, like, okay, do this, make the person, okay, you're thirsty, drink, here, we're going to elevate your cortisol. Cortisol is not unhealthy. It's only if you have, chronic elevated cortisol for, no reason, but you need it, like for many things, many health metrics. And so mine was sort of broken because of this. And I'm working on it. That first morning light is very important. It also helps you sleep. People need to foster sleep. That's very important.
All right, breast cancer.
Okay, so here's the thing. Estrogen and progesterone are not carcinogens. However, this very interesting work, this chapter was really the most horrible chapter in the book to write. And this is where I quote some of Avram Bluming, Carol Tavis's work. He's he's the oncologist. And the problem is the research in this area is so heterogeneous, where it's like, oh, they tested this drug on this group of women. Oh, and then they tested this drug for this amount of time. So what I say in this chapter is, I'm really sorry. I want to tell you definitively, will taking hormones give you breast cancer? And the answer is we can't say definitively. However, here's where I work things out for myself, and don't do exactly what I do, because you're not me. You need to look at your individual health and risks. And so what I said is, I have a family. We've dense boobs in my family. And so it makes it hard for them to see mammograms, and so I have some risk, but I get regular mammograms, and you can have false positives. That's another whole problem area. But so women who have breast cancer will die, most of them will die of heart disease. And 90% of breast cancer now is survivable. Now, you don't want this. It's horrible. You have to go through chemo. I mean, it's a terrible thing. I'm terrified of it. But we're terrified of the wrong thing because, like, it's like nobody's like looking through their shirt, like, oh, can you see my aorta through this top? Boobs are a big part of us. So that's why we're more afraid of breast cancer than the thing that really kills us, which is cardiovascular disease. And so I made that calculation. But in looking at this, I was desperate. Let me please, I got to find something out to tell women. And what I found out, because I looked for the stuff that says, oh, this is a bad idea too. You look for the adverse effects. You look for the disconfirming stuff. I'm always looking to like kill my darlings, like the stuff I believe I want, to be true. So that I take extra hard look at. And so Carol Sartorius and Catherine Horwitz, these Horwitz pioneer in doing receptor research, they found that though estrogen and progesterone are not carcinogens, if you have some in you already, they can pick it up and run with it. So that's what I say in the book. And so, but we can look at boobs through mammograms. And also, there just was some research crap, I forget. So, if you have dense breasts, you need an ultrasound, but they just came up with some new way. I wish I could remember what it is. I just saw that, and I have to read the paper to look at breasts of dense breasts. That's important. But again, false positives. Women can get treated for breast cancer that would never develop into anything. It's just a couple teeny cells, and so this is an unfortunate thing that I can't definitively tell you something in this chapter. But this is what I call it's not giving you amazeball science. Worry about the people who tell you, oh my God, it's incredible. It's going to cure cancer. You're going to have white teeth your whole life. And, you live in a mansion. No, 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 no. Look for the people who say, like, I don't know. I wish I could tell you that it really sucks. I can't. I'm so sorry. Because that's somebody who's being careful, about what they're telling you and cares to tell the truth as opposed to tell you something that's going to, make you excited and tell 60 people to buy their book.
White teeth, your life. That's such a great
we
line.
try. I drink so much coffee. It's an issue. So
This is great. Yeah, I had Eric Topol on the show. We just recorded it actually earlier today. He was talking about, all women over whatever the age is get a mammogram, and 88% of women will never get breast cancer, but 60% of women will have a false positive test because they do it every year for decades. And that even though the false positive rate is low, but there's so many tests.
It's terrifying too. I love Kaiser. This happened once. So I get there's some kind of, there's a little thing we see. They call me on Friday afternoon and leave that message. Like,
we'll see you next week.
Yeah,
well,
right.
Thanks.
What is wrong with you? This is so, like all weekend, I'm afraid. And I went in, they gave me a biopsy. It was nothing, but biopsy is not nothing. They're, digging into your with an instrument and everything. It's all terrifying, and so the problem too, one of the myths that I detail in the book is that doctors are not trained to assess risk. They cannot properly assess risk. Now, maybe an oncologist, I tell people in the book, look, if you want your risk assessed, maybe an oncologist will be able to do this. And you don't have to be a genius to do this. Gerd Gigerenzer, I quote him in the book, and he just talks about natural frequencies. We as humans did not evolve with percentages. We're not good at them. So what do you do? Easy. You draw 100 people on a page. You color in the ones who are going to end up sick or dead, and then you factor in the person's individual health and color in a few or erase a few. And then you say, here's your risk. In a meaningful way, we can look at people on a page and say, oh, okay, and understand that, but they don't understand stats. So doctors are often misled by pharmaceutical, like amazeball stats, like 50% more people. Like sometimes like one or two, like in out of 7,000 or something like that. It's terrible. I keep saying it's terrible, but all of it is, all of it.
Oh yeah, I use this example of in Bayesian reasoning and the diagnosis problem. A patient is diagnosed with cancer that has a 1% prevalence rate. That is, it happens to 1 out of 100 people. The test sensitivity for this type of cancer is 90%. That is, the test will be right 90% of the time. The false positive rate of the test is 9%. That is, the test will be wrong 9% of the time. What is the percent likelihood that the patient has cancer? And that almost everybody says it's between 80 and 90%, including medical doctors, when the actual answer is 9%. They have to do the numbers, but basically the flaw in the reasoning is the rate is very low, so it's very unlikely you'll get that cancer. But since everybody's tested for it, let's say millions of people are tested for it, that 5% false positive rate, or whatever I said it was, false positive rate of 9%. Yeah, that's the 9% of this huge population, and so that throws people's off. The Kahneman Tversky interpretation of that is the representative fallacy, that that we're used to thinking of people. A person has cancer or they don't. What is this 90% cancer? Well, that's on a huge population of people, but we didn't evolve to think about, huge statistical populations and percentages and probabilities and predictions. You either have cancer or you don't. What do you mean 9% is, whatever.
No, but this is important thinking. You see, when you're saying that, I just gave up because I need to do that calculation on a page. But
Right.
you
Right.
learn from Gerd Gigerenzer. He can train people in 90 minutes.
Yes. Yes.
It's amazing. And so med schools, the fault here. So I don't bash doctors in the book. I get mad, at them sometimes, but I can't do the whole, if I were you, I would, whatever, like give up
Yes.
my
Yeah,
life.
of course.
It's not fair. It's not right. The institutions not giving, say, my eye surgeon, an expert on steroids, all the eye doctors telling them, look, here are the standards, and giving them a lecture and saying, here's what they are, and they can call on those people. Like, they shouldn't be prescribing. She knows less about steroids. She's an elite surgeon. I'm lucky to have her, but she knows less about steroids than the average smart person in her waiting room who reads. It's insane that this is medicine. The other thing that they can't do, they're not trained in diagnostic reasoning, a la Dr. House. And so, Michael, you and I both love this kind of thinking. Like, I do this. In fact, that's how I encountered Carol Tavers first. She's a great book. Mistakes Were Made, but Not by Me, with her, with Elliot Aronson, and she wrote that book together. And those are the kind of books I buy and the thinking I do. My favorite class in all of high school was critical thinking, and but if you don't have that kind of thing, you don't love it. You're not going to be able to just do this on your own since you're not trained to do that. There's a guy named Alan Graber who's trying to get diagnostics into medical schools. Medical schools, they have no incentive to change. Nobody knows. And institutions, Kaiser, they should have people like Sandra Greenland and Gerd Gigerenzer looking at the stats on studies, and then people like me, Nina Teicholz, Gary Taubes, as the mole rats. We're looking at the science. And someone checks the stats, and then we make a determination, and not just having these people who basically, yeah, they have panels, but they're just confirming what's already been thought and done. And I saw that with my own. When you at Kaiser, if you complain that you're being given an unscientific treatment, they had me present to a panel. This is about menopause and perimenopause. There was not a gynecologist or endocrinologist on there. And basically, it's a panel designed to let you whine. And I presented all the science. They read none of it. And they simply called the gynecologist and said, "What's the standard of care?" Now I went all insane. Which gynecologist? I'm this guy, Seth Kivnick. He's a researcher. I'm like, did they ask you blah, blah, blah? He never wrote me back. It turned out they called my gynecologist, and he told me this, and he's great because if I explain the science to him on something, he'll treat me according to the evidence. I don't just say, "Here, give me this," but I explain to him, "Look, I have high SHBG binding my testosterone and estrogen." And he was the one who suggested he's gone till August. This is why I have a problem. So he was the one who made the suggestion that I'd use a double patch. This is not usual. Climera, the patch I use is just, you take one. But okay, I need more. You treat the individual patient. You don't say, "Oh, we're not going to give you that dose because the average person doesn't need it." There's no such thing as the average person. I'm me. I have certain health metrics. I'm weird in some ways compared to other people. And you treat me according to my body and the fact that I'm not getting the estradiol active in my system that I'm taking. So give me more, please, because you're prolonging my hot flashes and you're denying me the protective effects that I need for my endothelium and the rest of me. So,
The Kaiser docs must, when your name comes up in the computer, they must think, "Uh-oh, here she comes."
well, it's because everyone I have, I correct all this stuff. I just did a head of endocrinology. He's very nice to me. He's giving me a test I needed when, like, the ladies in gynecology she wouldn't test my estrogen. Hi, I'm telling you, I have I'm getting, not getting the estrogen I'm taking. What do? We guess? Yeah, so he tested that for me. But then he said the same thing on SHBG, estrogen elevates it. And I said, no, oral estrogen does. I'm taking transdermal, head of endocrinology. I mean, please, can somebody please know more than I do? Again, like, I'm just sitting here in Venice, my untidy house with the gardening clogs on the floor, reading a bunch of papers. So
Okay, sex, libido, desert vagina, and clitty dead zone.
I'd like to have fun. This is a terrifying subject, and I'm vulgar and funny, and so I use that. So desert vagina. Oh my God, the gynecologist, it was called vaginal atrophy, and they thought that that was mean and degrading to women, and they would name it something better. They named the whole down there thing and like bladder, vagina walls, like all of it. Genitourinary syndrome of menopause. It took me a while to be able to remember that. So great. You're telling women they have something they can't remember or pronounce, and that sounds frankly terrifying. And it doesn't describe the problem. Desert vagina. That describes the problem. When you don't have estrogen in menopause, all the stuff that it did, like keeping your vaginal walls all moist and nice, that stops. And you can have, atrophy of your urethra and your bladder, your muscles, everything. It can just, like, everything is just awful down there. But if you take estradiol, that systemic estradiol, or there's a kind of vaginal estradiol, that will help some of it. It will help, like, there's one kind, there's I'm not gonna remember what it's called. It's the keeping you up at night to pee all the time. That really helps that if you're taking estrogen. Now, vaginal estrogen, when you take estrogen, you need to take progesterone to counterbalance it because it's very important. So estrogen is proliferative. In the breasts, estrogen causes cells to proliferate, to grow and increase. And progesterone, what it does, it doesn't cut pair the cells, but what it does is it makes them specialize. So they're generic cells. They can become delinquents, do anything. And what it does is it makes them differentiate and turn into breast cells. So they've got a job to do. And then in the endometrium, the lining of the uterus, which can develop hyperplasia, which is it's overgrowth, cell overgrowth, which can become cancer. That progesterone, it decreases that, it counterbalances that. And so you need adequate progesterone for this, in this area. And so my problem with vaginal estrogen is they will tell you, "Oh, you don't need to take progesterone because it's local." Okay, no, it's not. There are some you see, especially at first, you see a systemic raise in estrogen. So that doesn't seem to last. However, they'll just say, "Oh, it doesn't seem to cause hyperplasia in your uterus." Well, okay, it's not that it doesn't in many people, but doesn't is not never. And for some women, there is hyperplasia. So when I talk to these ladies, so you can there's vaginal estrogen that's local, and there's one kind that's not, that's systemic. But I was going to take the local kind when I was going through this because my immune system was screwed up from this steroid overdose. I mean, just incredible medical here. So they were going to prescribe me the estradiol, vaginal estradiol. But oh my God, this is the head of gynecology. She tells me, okay, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 times a week. I said, no, that's the maintenance dose. The acute dose is daily for 2 weeks, and then you taper to 2 to 3 times a week. Hi, she's the head of gynecology. She's telling me she's an expert. She knows this area. She reads the science. She doesn't, no, she doesn't read anything. Or, she picked up like something in 2002 and hasn't looked at it since. So, and I'm telling her I need crinone, or, there are these tablets. So, sorry, that's for pregnancy. But there are these, I decided the tablets, progesterone tablets, I forget what they're called, endometrin, that I wanted those too, because, since it's possible that I could have hyperplasia from this. And, she would not give them to me. It's like, oh, no, doesn't do this. What, so because the doctors aren't reading the research, there's a possibility for incredible harm. And I'm conservative with drugs. I don't want to take a drug. I don't want to take more than I need. I err on the side of not taking drugs until I really just must take them, like with sleep drugs. In perimenopause, my sleep was covered by progesterone. In menopause, oh my God, welcome to crap sleep again. And so I worked with my one evidence-based doctor, my psychiatrist, to test different sleep drugs. I didn't want to take Ambien and these benzos that, cause cognitive harm. There's good research suggesting they do. And what I ended up doing was taking a drug called trazodone, which is an anti-anxiety drug off-label for sleep. I never would have taken it, but for him, and so doing this, it was just important to take something because I need my sleep rather than just to suffer and have, brain fog. I forget how I got in this topic, but where were we? Oh, well, so okay. So for the whole desert vagina thing, so not all women can take or want to take hormones. You can use these different lubes. Hyaluronic acid is very good. And there are the other lubes that you want to be careful not to get the one that destroys silicone if you're using condoms or toys. So this is a doable thing. But really, I think, for many women, because the bladder involvement and everything, there's more than just let me moisturize there that can go on. And so once you start to have this urinary atrophy, bladder atrophy, it's not like you can bring it back. That's why I was so angry at these women for denying me. I wouldn't I had the vaginal estradiol, but I wouldn't take it. I tried. This is like me. I didn't read on it, but I like, you can stick some progesterone caps up there, but they don't dissolve the way they do in stomach acid. All this is, sorry, TMI, but and so I couldn't do this. So I'm just not going to take it because it's not safe, since doesn't usually happen, is not never in terms of hyperplasia. And how dare they? And she said, oh, super physiologic dose. Guess what, lady? I read the research. They give like 1,200 milligrams of progesterone. I'm taking 300. And I only get that with my high SHBG because I know to correct for it with the one thing I can, which is pregnenolone. I take a huge amount of, it's the mother of all hormones. It's called a supplement called pregnenolone from, is it Swanson or GNC? I think it's Swanson. Wait, no, it's not, because you need micronized pregnenolone. I forget who I get it from. But anyway, that huge dose. And so the one steroid in me that is at a good level, which is important, protecting you from cancer and everything else, is progesterone. That's at a good place. And when one of the doctors mentioned that, I said, oh, that's because I fix it. I fix it with the thing I can fix it with, since no one can control that, and so it's just obnoxious that I'm being denied what I need, to protect myself and have adequate symptom relief. It's against medical ethics for them to do that.
Amazing. All right, Amy, let's wrap up here because I go pick up my kid. 6 questions to ask your doctor before agreeing to a treatment.
I've got them.
1, can you lay out your reasoning behind your diagnosis and the treatment you're recommending? 2, could there be other conditions that are causing my symptoms? The confounders. Hey, there's an idea. 3, what are my risks from this treatment? 4, are there safer, less invasive alternatives? 5, what can I expect during the treatment and what sort of recovery? And 6, do I need to do this now or could I wait or go without the treatment? And you have 8 minutes to answer those questions before your next patient. Go.
Well, actually, what I want to talk about, so this is that I printed them up so I could read them. But I'm glad you read them because I needed a vacation from talking. But so these are very important because you need to find out how, how scientific is the conclusion you have this, whatever they're saying you have. And your doctor, if they don't explain this, don't answer these reasonably, well, okay, either seek out other treatment, or, see that they do. You can ask over and over. And the thing I learned, I'm a mediator, so I do dispute resolution. I volunteer in the LA City Attorney's Office when I'm not on the book hiatus. And one of the things I've learned is to not rush, to not be on someone else's timetable. So, you need to have, it's called informed consent. In order to consent to medical care, you need to understand what you're diagnosed with, what the treatment is, why they're treating you this way. And if you're not informed, you cannot consent. And so this is part of it. And so you might need to make 3 appointments with a doctor. Don't be ashamed if you don't understand it. This is complicated stuff. It's scary. And all that matters is that you get to a point where you do. And if a doctor can't explain this clearly, there's a good chance they don't know what they're talking about. Because if you understand something, I see this with, I'll go to a conference, there'll be something that I understand when someone talks about it, but I can't talk about it. You have to understand on a level where you can explain it to another human being, like my psychiatrist can. He's a child psychiatrist. I see him for ADHD. And so he can explain to a 6-year-old the medication, why they're taking it, how it'll help them, what they're going through. And that's the kind of thing that you need and you deserve from every doctor. And just because so many of them don't have diagnostic ability, can't assess risk, don't know the science, they're basically in lab coats reading practice standards, and not all. There are some who do read the science and go by it, but, don't count on it because I really don't see anybody but my psychiatrist. And I got fired by the guy before him, short, angry guy, because I asked too many questions.
What? Oh, I'm
And
shocked. I can't believe
I was
that.
all suspicious. And so I was a little aggressive. And so like, you guys don't, and you don't know, I hate you, you don't know anything. So the first appointment was good. I was sort of impressed by him, but then I was still angry. And then I sent him studies by Randy Nesse, who's the co-founder of evolutionary medicine. I love his work. It's incredible. And said, here's this guy. And he said, oh, I know his work really well. I was like blown away. And this guy, during my little sleep test thing, drugs had just come out called orexin receptor antagonists. And I asked him about them and he said, I don't know anything about them. Oh my God, I love you. Doctors who say, I don't know like that, they're the doctors that you can trust on some level, at least. And so he does know now because he read about them. But, otherwise, if they're not explaining what they don't know, yeah, there's a problem. So with all of
Amazing.
this, you deserve to understand what you're being treated, why you're being treated a certain way, and it needs to go in accord with your values. This is called shared decision making. That a doctor needs to consider who you are, what matters to you in deciding your care. Like if a woman doesn't want to take estrogen, you don't push her. You can ask her if she wants to understand why that might be problematic or whatever, But that's all. You need to do it in a way where you're not bullying people.
You know who needs to read this book, Amy, besides women? Doctors.
I know. Well, this book also, this is what I tell people, it's so funny because here I am on your podcast and you're joking about like, okay, it's a vagina land. But the thing is that this book takes on the problems in medicine and how they need to be fixed at the medical school and institution level, and also,
Clearly.
yeah. And so this is more than just a book on menopause. And I had to write that chapter because I found when people who really trust my work, like my copy editor's wife, she's read me for a million years and knows the science I put in and the thinking. She said, I don't want to believe you. Oh, she's actually the head of this. She's at the lead of that chapter. I don't want to believe you, because if I do, my doctor doesn't know anything. And this is terrifying. Like,
Yeah.
what do I do? Because if you're not me and can't read the research, like in this incredible nerdy deep dive way, you don't have time, whatever, you go to the doctor and you're just sort of like, you're a victim to anything you get told.
Well, of course, you don't want to encourage people to do their own research who don't know how to
Oh,
do
no,
that. And then,
exactly. Don't do your own research. If you don't know how to read studies, if you don't know, does the study have a control group? What's, things like that. Why you need to look at a body of research to see if the effect is the same. When I talked about heterogeneous breast cancer research, and it's like on different forms and for different amounts of time and different ages of women, you can't say anything conclusive from that. And if you don't know that, this do your own research thing. My God, yeah, read WebMD, and then decide you're going to take this drug that could cause you all sorts of problems.
All right, Amy, I got to run. Thank you so much. Great book. Really important work. Really important.
Thank you.
Again, I'm just astonished at how much ignorance is still out there about this. So thank God or whoever for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's always great talking to you. You ask great questions, and it's fun.